The Lumina High Counselor, Xylos, stood bathed in the ethereal glow of the Chamber of Echoes, the light refracting through the crystalline structures that grew from the chamber floor like a petrified forest of starlight. His form, a being of woven light and solidified consciousness, shimmered with a disquiet that sent subtle waves across the spectrum of his being, a silent testament to the gravity of their convocation. Before him, the great circular dais held the assembled intellects of the Galactic Concordance, a union of species whose empires had charted the void for millennia. The air itself, a meticulously crafted blend of atmospheric gases and subtle psychic resonance, was thick with an unspoken tension that transcended mere politics. It was a tension born of existential dread. At the heart of this dread was a single, maddeningly simple species, the humans. From the obsidian throne of the Cathar Imperium, the hulking form of Warlord Grax shifted, his quadrilensed eyes narrowing as they focused on the central holographic display. The image was of a human vessel, a design of primitive, almost brutalist simplicity, yet it hung in the void of the contested zone with an insolence that grated on the Cathar's warrior sensibilities. It was flanked by no fleet, broadcasted no threats, yet its very presence was a declaration of power that none in this chamber could decipher. They were a species that should not exist, a biological anomaly that had clawed its way out of a death-world ecosystem with astonishing speed, brandishing technology that seemed to violate the known pathways of scientific progression. They were loud in their silence, a void in the data streams where there should have been a history, a lineage, a logical ascent. Their continued silence is the true aggression, Grax's voice boomed, a low-frequency rumble that vibrated through the chamber's crystalline latticework. They sit at the edge of the Thorn Nebula, a region claimed by treaty and sanctified by the blood of Cathar warriors, and they do nothing. This passivity is a mockery. They test our resolve, our unity. They prod the Imperium with their stillness, daring us to act. His massive, clawed hand clenched into a fist, the gesture a physical manifestation of his empire's frustration. The Cathar understood strength, challenge, and the clarity of open war. They did not understand the quiet confidence of this fledgling race that acted as if it had no need to prove itself. Opposite the Cathar delegation, the Signian emissary, a being of fluidic metal and cold, processing light, projected its thoughts directly into the psychic medium of the chamber. Its form swirled within its containment field, a vortex of mercury and logic. Warlord Grax's assessment is predicated on emotion, not data. The humans have violated no treaty. They have crossed no demarcated border. Their vessel remains in unclaimed space, its energy signature deceptively low, its emissions clean. There is no evidence of hostile intent. To interpret their silence as aggression is to project our own cultural paradigms onto a species that has consistently defied them. The Signians' logic was, as always, impeccable and infuriatingly detached. They saw the galaxy as a grand, intricate equation, and humanity was the variable that broke every model they constructed. Xylos of the Lumina, whose species perceived existence as a symphony of interconnected consciousness, felt the dissonance keenly. The Signians analyzed, the Cathar postured, but the Lumina felt. And what they felt from humanity was a terrifying enigma. Their psychic probes, instruments of such sensitivity that they could sense the dying thoughts of a star, returned from the human vessel not with emptiness, but with a placid, impenetrable calm. It was not a shield, not a barrier of psychic force, but something more profound. It was like trying to read the thoughts of a mountain or sense the emotional state of the vacuum itself. This tranquility was more unnerving than any psychic scream of aggression could ever be. It hinted at a depth of being, a control of consciousness that the Lumina, for all their eons of spiritual evolution, had never encountered. "Emissary, your logic is a cold comfort," Xylos projected, his own light flaring with a soft, golden anxiety. "Data is merely the shadow of reality. We have analyzed their biology, a fragile carbon-based form prone to decay, susceptible to radiation, a myriad of internal and external threats. Their planetary cradle was a maelstrom of violence, a crucible that should have forged a species of desperate, grasping predators, and in some ways it has. Their history, the fragmented data we have managed to collate, is a litany of self-inflicted violence and tribal conflict. Yet they emerged from this chaos not as fractured barbarians, but as this." He gestured a limb of pure light toward the central hologram, the human ship. It was not a weapon of war, not in the way the Kate. Har understood it. It was sleek, seamless, a perfect obsidian teardrop that seemed to absorb the light of the nearby stars. It displayed no weapon ports, no visible shielding emitters, no overt signs of military capability. Yet every sensor array in the concordance that had dared to scan it returned readings that were contradictory, impossible. Its drive signature was non-existent, yet it moved. Its energy core was undetectable, yet it sustained systems of unimaginable complexity. It was a ghost in the machine of physics, a quiet refutation of everything the combined science of the galaxy had held as true. A junior counselor from a lesser species, a silicon-based lifeform whose people had only recently achieved interstellar travel, dared to speak, its crystalline voice chiming with nervous energy. Perhaps they are a lie, a projection, a proxy for a greater power we have yet to encounter. The suggestion hung in the air, a desperate grasp for a comforting explanation, for a familiar narrative of puppet masters and hidden empires. Warlord Grax scoffed, the sound like grinding rock. A projection does not halt the advance of a Cathar battle fleet with a simple broadcast. When our vanguard approached their outpost on the edge of the Veil Nebula, they did not fire. They did not raise shields. They transmitted a single, complex mathematical proof. Proof that our finest military strategists and logisticians are still struggling to comprehend, but which, at its core, demonstrated with irrefutable certainty that any aggressive action on our part would result in the mutually assured destruction of both our forces. Not through weapons, but through the calculated manipulation of spacetime, a consequence of our own warp drive emissions interacting with a field they had subtly generated. The warlord's admission was heavy with a warrior's shame. His fleet had been defeated by mathematics. The Cygnian emissary swirled again. The incident to which Warlord Grax refers is central to our conundrum. The mathematics they broadcasted was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, a warning delivered without malice. They were, in essence, advising the Cathar fleet of a dangerous navigational hazard that would be created by its own actions. It is this ethical framework that we find so illogical. Their technological superiority is demonstrable, yet they refuse to leverage it in a manner consistent with any known model of civilization's expansion. They do not conquer. They do not threaten. They observe. They wait, Xylos corrected, his light pulsing. And that is the most terrifying prospect of all. What are they waiting for? We have offered them entry into the concordance. We have offered trade, cultural exchange, shared knowledge. They have politely, almost apologetically, declined every overture. They say they are not yet ready, that their own house is not yet in order. What kind of species achieves this level of technological mastery but considers itself not ready to engage with its neighbors? The debate circled, as it always did, back to the central, unanswerable question. Who were the humans? Their star charts showed an empire that was not an empire, a loose federation of worlds bound by a shared philosophy that the concordance could not parse. Their communications were open, yet revealed nothing of substance. They shared their art, their music, their literature, works of profound emotional depth and intellectual complexity, but never their science, never their history, never the core of their identity. They were a people defined by their contradictions, a violent past and a placid present, a primitive biology and a transcendent technology, a profound humility and an unshakable confidence. We are ancient, Warlord Grax rumbled, his voice low and tinged with a rare note of introspection. The Cathar have waged war amongst these stars for 100,000 of your human years. We have seen empires rise and fall like the turning of the galactic tide. The Lumina have meditated on the nature of consciousness since the first stars ignited. The Cygnians have calculated the orbits of galaxies yet to form. We are the architects of this galactic age, and these children, these fleeting, soft-skinned beings who live and die in the blink of a cosmic eye, they look upon us with pity. The word once spoken could not be recalled. It resonated in the chamber, a shocking and unwelcome truth. Pity. It was there, hidden in the subtext of their polite refusals, in the patient tone of their rare communications. They treated the great powers of the concordance not as equals or even as rivals, but as adolescents, bright, promising, but dangerously impulsive and tragically short-sighted. The Cygnian emissary's fluid form stilled, a rare sign of deep processing. The warlord's emotional interpretation aligns with a low-probability, high-impact analytical model. This model posits that humanity's technological and social development did not follow a linear progression. Our deep-core analysis of their fragmented historical data suggests a pattern of catastrophic self-destruction, followed by periods of rapid, almost explosive rebuilding. They have perhaps fallen from a great height more times than we have taken a single step. Their calmness may not be born of superiority, but of exhaustion, of a wisdom forged in fires we cannot imagine. Xylos felt a chill that his light form should not have been capable of, a wisdom born of repeated self-immolation. It was a terrifying thought. A species that had learned to master the universe by first mastering the art of surviving its own worst impulses. What would such a people be capable of? What would they fear? What would they value? They value life, Xylos stated, the realization solidifying within his consciousness. All life. It is the one consistent thread in all our interactions. Their single deep space outpost near the Kalani Expanse is not a military base. It is a biological preserve, a sanctuary for endangered species from a dozen worlds, species that we in our haste and arrogance had driven to the brink of extinction. They expend immense resources to preserve the insignificant. Insignificant to us, Grax countered. But perhaps not to them. Perhaps they see a reflection, a reminder of their own fragility. For a long moment, the Chamber of Echoes was silent, the assembled powers of the galaxy lost in their own contemplations. They had built empires, forged alliances, and waged wars on a scale that would have shattered the minds of lesser beings. They commanded fleets that could sterilize star systems, wielded energies that could reshape worlds, and possessed knowledge accumulated over eons. And yet they were held in check, mentally and strategically, by a silent vessel, crewed by a species of ephemeral, soft-bodied apes who had only just learned to walk among the stars, and who seemed to carry the weight of a history far older than their years. The mystery of humanity was a shadow that fell across them all, a quiet, patient question mark hanging in the heart of their galaxy. And in that silence, every leader in the chamber felt the cold, undeniable certainty that the answer, when it finally came, would change everything. The decision was made not by consensus, but by the exhaustion of all other options. The Cathar could not provoke a fight without a pretense of aggression. The Signians could not act without sufficient data. The Lumina, guided by their philosophy of non-interference, were loath to force a confrontation, so they would extend one final, formal invitation, a request for direct dialogue here in the Chamber of Echoes. It was a summons, cloaked in the polite language of diplomacy. They would demand an answer, an explanation for humanity's presence and its intentions. They would bring the full weight of their combined history and power to bear, and they would force this enigmatic species to finally reveal itself. The message was sent, a tightly coded pulse of light and logic, across the silent void to the lone human ship. The Concordance held its collective breath and waited for the ghost to speak. The reply came almost instantly, which was in itself unsettling. There was no deliberation, no time taken to consult with a distant homeworld or a high command. The response was simple, concise, and utterly devoid of the expected diplomatic deference. It read, "We accept. We are on our way." There was no request for coordinates, no inquiry into protocol, no negotiation of terms, just a statement of imminent arrival. A ripple of consternation passed through the chamber. "On their way?" Warlord Grax growled. "Their vessel is in the Thorn Nebula. At its maximum sustainable warp velocity, it would take several rotations of this planet to reach us. Are they toying with us?" The Signian emissary's form pulsed with agitated light. "Their vessel has not moved. Its energy signature remains unchanged. Yet the reply implies immediacy. This is a logical contradiction." Before any further debate could commence, the very fabric of the chamber seemed to hum. It was not a sound, but a feeling, a subtle vibration in the crystalline structures, a pressure against the psychic resonance of the space. The great central holographic display flickered, the image of the distant human ship dissolving into a cascade of static. Then the static cleared, but it was not the star chart that reappeared. It was a new image, a live feed from just outside the Concordant Citadel, the immense station that housed the Chamber of Echoes. Hanging in the void, where a moment before there had been only empty space, was the obsidian teardrop of the human vessel. It had not arrived via a warp corridor, nor had it dropped out of hyperspace. There had been no temporal distortion, no gravitational wake, no burst of Cherenkov radiation. It had simply appeared, as if it had been there all along, waiting to be seen. Ascent. A silence, deeper and more profound than any before, fell upon the chamber. The Cathar warlord was frozen on his throne, his quadrilensed eyes wide with a shock that transcended his warrior's pride. The Signian emissary's fluidic form had ceased its swirling, becoming a rigid, unmoving statue of polished mercury. Even Xylos, a being of light, felt a dimming of his own essence, a cold wave of pure, unadulterated awe. This was not technology as they understood it. This was something else. This was a casual, effortless mastery of the fundamental laws of physics that their most advanced theories had only ever described as a theoretical impossibility. The ship hailed them. The voice that came through the chamber's communicators was calm, melodic, and completely devoid of any accent or electronic distortion. It was a single voice, male by human standards, and it spoke their Central Concordance trade language with the fluency of a native. Concordance High Council, this is the human vessel Vindication. We have arrived as requested. We await your permission to send our representative. The word Vindication echoed in the silence, a name that seemed both ominous and deeply poignant. Vindication for what? Against whom? Xylos found his voice first, his light form coalescing with renewed focus. He was the High Counselor. He would show no fear. Human vessel Vindication, you are acknowledged. Your arrival was unexpected. You may send your representative. A transport corridor will be open to docking Bay 7. The calm human voice replied, that will not be necessary. If you will permit it, our representative can be with you directly. It is a more efficient method of transport. Before Xylos could process the meaning of that statement, a section of the chamber floor, a solid, seamless expanse of psychoreceptive crystal that had remained untouched for millennia, began to shimmer, not with the crude energy of a teleportation beam, but with a gentle, coalescing light. The light swirled, brightened, and then resolved itself into a solid form. Standing in the center of the great dais, where no physical being had ever stood unescorted, was a human. He was of average height for his species, clad in a simple, form-fitting suit of a deep, non-reflective gray. The suit bore no insignia, no rank, no ornamentation. His face was unremarkable, with calm, dark eyes that surveyed the assembled leaders of the galaxy not with arrogance, not with fear, but with a quiet, patient curiosity. He carried no visible weapons, no tools, no diplomatic pouch. He simply stood there, breathing their air as if he had been born to it, his presence an island of utter tranquility in a sea of galactic shock. Warlord Grax was the first to recover, his warrior instincts overriding his astonishment. He rose from his throne, his immense form casting a long shadow over the human. By what sorcery do you stand here? You have breached the sanctity of this chamber. This is an act of aggression. The human turned his gaze to the Cathar warlord. He did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He simply met the warlord's enraged glare with a look of serene understanding. It was not sorcery, Warlord Grax. It was merely a more direct path. We intended no disrespect. We sought only to be efficient, to not waste your time with the formalities of docking and transport. If we have caused offense, we offer our sincere apologies. His apology was so genuine, so devoid of guile or fear, that it disarmed the warlord more effectively than any weapon could have. Grax stood there, his threat hanging impotently in the air, unsure how to respond to an intruder who apologized for his intrusion with such placid sincerity. The Cygnian emissary broke the standoff, its thoughts a precise, analytical stream. Your method of transport. It is not teleportation. There was no energy displacement, no quantum signature. Please explain the principles of this technology. The human offered a small, sad smile. I am afraid I cannot. Not because it is a secret, but because the principles upon which it is based would not be meaningful to you. It would be like trying to explain the concept of color to a being who has never known light. Our understanding of physical law has followed a different path from your own. To understand our transport, you would first have to understand our perspective on the nature of reality itself. And that is a conversation for another time. This was a new kind of arrogance, more profound and more unsettling than any the Concordance had ever encountered. It was the arrogance of a teacher speaking to a student, of an adult addressing a child. He was not refusing to share knowledge out of malice, but out of a calm assessment that they were simply not capable of understanding it. Xylos, as High Counselor, reasserted control. His light pulsed with a commanding, golden brilliance. Human, you were invited here to answer our questions, to explain the presence of your people in concordant space, to state your intentions. We are a council of ancient and powerful civilizations. We are not children to be patronized. You will speak, and you will speak plainly. The human diplomat inclined his head in a gesture of respect. Of course, High Counselor, I am here to answer your questions. My name is Kalen. I speak for the collective of humanity. Please ask what you will. We have nothing to hide. His name was Kalen, a simple name for the representative of a species that could rewrite the laws of physics at will. The disjunction was jarring. The Cygnian emissary began, its questions sharp and to the point, a rapid-fire interrogation designed to find inconsistencies, to build a data profile. What is the nature of your propulsion system? What is the source of your energy? What is the extent of your territory? What is the structure of your government? To each question, Kalen provided an answer that was both truthful and utterly useless. Their propulsion system did not move the ship. It moved the universe around the ship. Their energy was drawn from the zero-point vacuum, but in a way that did not create a corresponding energy debt. Their territory was not defined by borders, but by areas of responsibility, most of which were galactic preserves and zones of scientific observation. Their government was not a government, but a consensus-based network of thought, a collective consciousness that emerged from the free will of every individual, guided by a shared ethical framework. Each answer was a philosophical rabbit hole, a polite and maddening evasion that revealed a deeper, more fundamental gap in understanding. They were not just technologically advanced, they were philosophically divergent. They had built a civilization on principles that the concordance could not even begin to model. Warlord Grax, growing impatient with the Cygnian's sterile questioning, slammed his fist on the arm of his throne. Enough of these riddles. Let us speak of what matters: power, strength. You sit on the edge of Cathar territory with a vessel of demonstrable superiority. You humiliate my fleets with mathematical tricks. What is it you want? Do you seek to conquer us, to enslave us, to supplant us as the dominant power in this galaxy? Kalen turned his calm eyes back to the warlord. The sad smile returned to his lips. Warlord Grax, he said, his voice soft but resonant, you speak of dominance as if it is a prize to be won. You speak of conquest as if it has value. We have walked that path. We have walked it 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways on a world so full of life that it bled with conflict. We have built empires of iron and blood, of faith and fear, of gold and greed. We have conquered our planet, we have conquered our star system, and we have conquered ourselves. And we have learned a simple, immutable truth. He paused, letting his words settle into the profound silence of the chamber. Dominance is an illusion, a fire that consumes everything, including the one who wields it. The only true victory is in understanding. The only true power is in creation, not destruction. The warlord stared at him, his quadrilensed eyes blinking in confusion. This was the philosophy of a weakling, of a poet, not of a species that could make its starships appear out of thin air. Words, Grax growled. Empty words. Your power belies your philosophy. Does it? Kalen asked gently. Our power is not for conquest, it is for preservation, it is for stewardship. We have traveled far and we have seen the truth of the universe. And the truth is this: life is the exception, consciousness is the miracle, and the galaxy is filled with the echoes of those who learned this lesson too late. He then did something that no one could have predicted. He raised his hand, and the central holographic display, which had been dark since his arrival, flickered to life. But it did not show a star chart or a tactical display. It showed images, scenes from across the galaxy, rendered in stunning, heartbreaking detail. It showed a world of crystalline forests, much like the Lumina's chamber. But this world was dead, shattered, its crystalline lifeforms reduced to dust by a stellar flare that the concordance had registered as a minor, insignificant cosmic event. Kalen spoke softly. The shimmering veil of Cygnus X1, an entire sentient ecosystem, a consciousness that existed in the vibration of crystals, extinguished because no one was listening to the song of its star. The image changed. It showed the gas giant of a forgotten nebula, its swirling clouds alive with vast, bioluminescent creatures, leviathans of the solar winds that communicated through patterns of light. The image then showed a Cathar mining operation on a nearby moon, its industrial runoff slowly, inexorably poisoning the atmosphere of the gas giant, the lights of the leviathans dimming, one by one, until the great clouds were dark and silent. W. Our Lord Grax made a low, guttural sound in his throat. He recognized the nebula. It was an operation from centuries ago, abandoned when the mineral veins ran dry. He had never known, never even considered, that the clouds themselves might be alive. The image changed again, a barren, rocky world, and on its surface a single delicate silicon-based flower pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light. The last of its kind, Kalen said, his voice a whisper of sorrow. A species that evolved past the need for a body, becoming pure information encoded in the genetic structure of this plant. Its entire civilization, its history, its art, its philosophy, all contained in this one, final, fragile life form. We found it by accident. We are now its guardians. He lowered his hand, and the images faded, leaving the assembled leaders of the galaxy in a stunned, shamed silence. They were not being threatened. They were being judged, and they were being found wanting. You see, Kalen continued, his voice regaining its calm, measured tone, you have been so busy building your empires, so focused on your borders and your treaties and your wars that you have not been paying attention to the galaxy itself. You are like children squabbling over possession of a single room while the rest of the house falls into ruin around you. We do not want to rule you. We want to ask for your help. We want to invite you to join us in our work, the work of preservation, the work of listening, the work of being true guardians of the miracle of life. The great reveal the moment the concordance had anticipated with such dread had come. And it was not a declaration of war. It was not a demand for submission. It was an indictment. A gentle, sorrowful indictment of their entire way of life, of the foundations upon which their millennia-old civilizations had been built. Humanity, the young, fragile, primitive upstarts, had come to them not as conquerors, but as caretakers. They had spent their time among the stars not charting territories, but cataloging endings. And in doing so, they had become something ancient, something the concordance, for all its power and age, had never thought to become: wise. The silence that followed was broken by Xylos. His light form, which had been a brilliant, commanding gold, was now a soft, subdued blue, the color of melancholy and deep contemplation. You have seen all this? You have watched us, and you did nothing? You let these species perish. Kalen's expression was one of profound sadness. We did not have the right to interfere. That is a lesson we learned at a terrible cost. The first law of our philosophy is that all conscious life must be allowed to find its own path, even if that path leads to ruin. We can only intervene when a species asks for help, or when the actions of one threaten the existence of another. We came to your contested zone, warlord Grax, not to challenge the Cathar, but because your impending war with the Thylian hegemony over the resources of that nebula threatened to destabilize a nearby protostar, which would have sterilized 3 nascent, presentient worlds. We did not stop your fleet with mathematics. We merely showed you the consequences of your own actions, hoping you would choose a different path. The chamber was no longer a hall of power. It was a courtroom, and every leader present felt the crushing weight of a guilt they had never known they possessed. Their empires, their histories, their grand strategies, all of it suddenly seemed so small, so petty, so profoundly and tragically misguided. The Cygnian emissary, for the first time in its recorded history, projected a thought that was not based on data or logic, but on a nascent, unquantifiable feeling. What is it you want us to do? Kalen looked at the swirling, metallic form, and for the first time his smile was not sad, but filled with a glimmer of hope. We want you to listen with us. The galaxy is filled with voices, but you have forgotten how to hear them. We have built an instrument, a listening post in the Thorn Nebula, the vessel you have been watching. It is not a warship. It is a key to a deeper level of communication, a way to hear the symphony of life that plays in the silence between the stars. We want you to join us, to add your voices to the choir, to become what you were always meant to be, not just rulers of worlds, but members of a galactic community. The invitation was so unexpected, so vast in its implications, that it left them speechless. Humanity was not seeking to join their concordance. They were inviting the concordance to join them, to become part of something older, deeper, and infinitely more meaningful than the political squabbles that had defined their existence for eons. The upstarts were not upstarts at all. They were gatekeepers, and they were, at long last, holding the door open. The shift in the Chamber of Echoes was palpable, a tectonic realignment of power, and perspective. The arrogance of the Cathar had been shattered, replaced by a humbling and unfamiliar sense of responsibility. The cold logic of the Cygnians had been fractured by the introduction of variables, ethics, stewardship, cosmic grief, that their processors struggled to quantify. And the Lumina, for all their spiritual introspection, realized they had been meditating on the nature of their own consciousness while ignoring the vast chorus of other consciousnesses all around them. The human, Kalen, had not defeated them with force, but had dismantled their entire worldview with a quiet, irrefutable truth. Warlord Grax was the first to speak, his voice stripped of its usual booming authority, now low and gravelly with contemplation. You speak of guardianship, of listening. The Cathar are warriors. Our purpose has always been to expand, to secure, to dominate. What role is there for a warrior in this choir you speak of? Kalen's gaze was steady, respectful. The greatest role of all, warlord. The warrior's truest purpose is not to wage war, but to protect the peace, to stand guard over those who cannot defend themselves. The galaxy is not an empty, benign place. There are forces, natural and otherwise, that are inimical to life. There are cosmic events, rogue singularities, predatory ideologies that sweep through the void. Your strength, your martial prowess, your unwavering resolve, these are not things to be discarded. They are to be repurposed. Imagine your fleets not as instruments of conquest, but as a shield, protecting the fragile nurseries of new life, defending the ancient archives of species long dead, ensuring that the symphony is never silenced by violence. The concept was so radical, so completely alien to the Cathar ethos, that Grax could only stare. To be a protector, not a conqueror. To find honor not in victory, but in preservation. It was a redefinition of his entire existence. And yet, deep within his warrior's heart, the idea resonated with a profound and unexpected sense of rightness. The Cygnian emissary projected its thoughts, its usual precision now tinged with a new, inquisitive humility. Our purpose is the acquisition and analysis of data. To build models of reality, your proposal is difficult to process. It requires the integration of non-quantifiable values. How can we serve when our very nature is to observe and calculate, not to feel? Your role is perhaps the most vital, Kalen replied, turning to the swirling metallic form. You are the librarians, the archivists, the ones who can see the patterns that others miss. You can analyze the song of a dying star and predict its impact on a dozen systems. You can decipher the complex biological language of a silicon-based life form. You can build the models that will allow us to understand, to anticipate, to act not out of impulse, but with perfect knowledge. Your logic is not a weakness. It is your greatest gift. It must simply be applied to a greater equation, the preservation of all knowable things. Finally, Xylos of the Lumina let his own soft, blue light pulse toward the human. And us, Kalen of Earth, we who have spent eons contemplating the inner universe, what is our place in this grand design? You are the heart, Kalen said, his voice imbued with a special reverence. You understand consciousness in a way no other species does. You can communicate where words and data fail. You can feel the psychic resonance of a world on the brink of sentience. You can soothe the fears of a species facing its own extinction. You are the diplomats, the counselors, the ones who will build the bridges of understanding between minds so alien that they would otherwise never touch. Your inner journey has prepared you for the greatest outer journey of all, the connection of all conscious life into a single, empathetic whole. He had given each of them a new purpose, a new identity, one that did not erase their history but elevated it. He had shown them a path away from their endless cycles of conflict and competition, toward a shared destiny that was grander than any of them had ever conceived. A fragile, tentative alliance began to form in the chamber, not through treaties and negotiations, but through a shared, dawning sense of awe and purpose. This instrument you have built, Xylos said, his voice formal once more, but with a new undertone of partnership. This key, how does it work? What will it allow us to hear? Kalen's expression became more serious, the weight of his true purpose finally settling upon him. It is not a machine in the way you understand it. It is a resonance chamber, one that attunes itself not to energy or radiation, but to the faint, residual echoes of consciousness that permeate all of spacetime. We have learned that consciousness is not a fleeting byproduct of biology. It is a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or light, and it leaves a mark. A memory encoded into the fabric of reality itself. The Vindication can read those memories. It can listen to the echoes of the past. A profound stillness filled the chamber. The implications of what he was saying were staggering. To listen to the thoughts of the dead. To hear the voices of entire civilizations that had vanished into dust 1 billion years ago. We brought you here, Kalen continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, to this most ancient and respected of places to ask you to join us for the first activation. We believe that such a momentous event should not be witnessed by humanity alone. It should be shared by all who are willing to listen. The concordance was no more. In its place was a new council, a fellowship of purpose. Without a formal vote, without a single word of dissent, the decision was made. They would accept. They would join humanity. They would listen. We accept, Xylos said, his voice the voice of them all. Kalen nodded, a deep and solemn gratitude in his eyes. He closed his eyes for a moment, and aboard the Vindication, hanging silently in the void outside, something changed. A low, resonant hum, a note of impossible depth and purity, emanated from the ship and washed over the citadel. It was not a physical sound, but a psychic one, a vibration that resonated directly with the consciousness of every being in the chamber. The great holographic display flickered to life again, but this time it showed a swirling, chaotic vortex of light and shadow. It was the raw, unfiltered stream of data from the Vindication's consciousness drive. The instrument is active, Kalen said, his eyes still closed. It is sifting through the layers of time, through the cosmic background radiation of thought. It is searching for a signal, the oldest signal, the first voice. The vortex on the display began to coalesce, the chaos resolving into patterns, the static into whispers. Faint, ghostly sounds and images flickered at the edge of perception. They heard the psychic death screams of stars being born, the slow, tectonic thoughts of worlds taking shape, the first tentative sparks of biological consciousness in primordial oceans. They were listening to the birth of the galaxy itself. The experience was overwhelming, a torrent of sensory and emotional data that threatened to shatter their minds. Yet Kalen stood at its center, an anchor of calm, guiding their perception, filtering the chaos into something they could comprehend. And then through the cosmic noise, a single, clear signal emerged. It was not a voice. It was not a sound. It was a feeling, a concept, pure, undiluted, and infinitely ancient. It was a feeling of profound, soul-crushing loneliness. The display resolved into a clear image. It was a world not unlike the human homeworld, but older, its continents weathered by ages beyond imagining. And on this world, a single city, a breathtaking structure of living crystal and woven light that pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence. And in the heart of that city, a single being. Its form was indistinct, almost a memory, but its presence was undeniable. It was the source of the signal. The first sentient being in this galaxy, the firstborn. It had lived for an eon alone, the sole spark of consciousness in a silent, sleeping universe. It had watched the stars ignite, had seen the galaxies take their first slow spin, and it had waited for another voice to answer its own. But no voice ever came. And so, after an age of solitude that would have driven any lesser being to madness, it had made a decision. If the universe would not create companions, it would do so itself. The image shifted. They saw the firstborn extending its will, its very essence, across the void. It touched barren worlds and seeded them with the potential for life. It guided the delicate dance of amino acids in a billion primordial soups. It did not create life in its own image, for it had no desire to create echoes of itself. Instead, it fractured its own consciousness into an infinite variety of possibilities, planting the seeds of Cathar strength, of Lumina spirituality, of Signian logic, and a thousand other forms, all unique, all different, all with the potential to one day rise and speak back to the silence. It was the ultimate act of creation, born of the ultimate loneliness. It was the genesis of their entire galactic family, and they had never known. But the story was not over. The final image solidified, and it was this that broke the last vestiges of their composure. It showed the firstborn, its great work complete, its energy spent, preparing for its final rest. But before it faded, it did one last thing. It took the last, most concentrated spark of its being, the part that contained not its power, but its hope, its curiosity, its tenacity, its infinite capacity to endure suffering and still strive. And it sent that spark to a small, violent, insignificant blue-green world, orbiting a nondescript yellow star. A whir. LD it had designated as its last best hope, a world it had named Earth. The realization crashed down upon the chamber with the force of a supernova. Humanity was not just another species in the galactic choir. They were not the upstarts. They were not the children. They were the direct inheritors, the chosen successors of the firstborn itself. The reason their biology was so fragile was because it was designed to be adaptable. The reason their history was so violent was because they carried within them the full, undiluted spectrum of the firstborn's desperate, striving will. The reason their technology was so advanced was because, deep in their collective unconscious, in the very fabric of their DNA, lay the buried memories, the slumbering knowledge of the architect of the galaxy. The title, the question that had plagued them, finally had its answer. Humans are how old? They were as old as life itself. Kalen opened his eyes. They were filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of an ancient, weary, and profound sense of homecoming. We did not know, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Not for most of our history. We were just as lost as you. We fought, we bled, we despaired. We nearly extinguished ourselves a dozen times, but with every fall we remembered a little more. With every piece of knowledge we gained, the echo of the firstborn grew stronger in us. We are not gods. We are not a superior species. We are just the first to wake up, the first to remember. He looked at the stunned faces of the council, the beings his ancestors had created, and his expression was one of infinite empathy. The firstborn's loneliness was its gift to us all. It created a universe of infinite variety so that no one would ever have to be alone again. Its final message, the one we have spent our entire existence trying to fully understand, was not a command. It was a plea. The human diplomat, the inheritor of the stars, stood before his long-lost brethren and delivered the final, universe-altering twist, the message from their creator. It said, "Find each other, and when you are all ready, come find me." The implication hung in the silent chamber, a thought so vast it dwarfed everything that had come before. The firstborn was not dead. It was waiting. Somewhere beyond the borders of their galaxy, beyond the knowable universe, their creator was waiting for its family to finally come home. The squabbles over territory, the petty wars, the eons of disconnected history, all of it was just the prelude. The real journey, the true purpose of their existence, was only just beginning. And humanity, the quiet, patient, long-suffering stewards of this ancient truth, were finally ready to lead the way. The Chamber of Echoes was silent no more. It was filled with the sound of a galaxy taking its first united breath.